The click of handcuffs locking in a sterile airport jet bridge is a deafening sound. A senior flight attendant, Brenda, stands with a smirk on her face, watching as security leads a black woman off her plane. The woman, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, had been labeled aggressive and a security risk. But as the officers push her forward, the woman stops, looks at the flight attendant, and says 4 words that will end her career. You have no idea. That woman wasn't just a passenger. She was the undercover federal inspector sent to investigate her. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the familiar, anxious energy of travel. It was a humid Tuesday in late September, and the terminal was a river of people flowing around islands of luggage. Dr. Imani Cole blended into the chaos perfectly. To the preoccupied travelers and hurried staff, she was just another face in the crowd, one of thousands. She wore faded blue jeans, a grey zip-up hoodie from a small state university she'd never attended, and a pair of nondescript sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a simple, functional bun. The only thing that hinted at her true purpose was the worn JanSport backpack she carried, a bag that looked like a college student's, but was, in reality, a meticulously organized kit for a federal field operative. Imani was flying Global Airways Flight 1109, non-stop from JFK to LAX. She was booked in seat 24B, a middle seat in economy. She could have been in 1A. Her real credentials, safely tucked away, afforded her almost any privilege. But privilege was not the point. Anonymity was. Dr. Imani Cole was a Level 5 aviation safety inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration, a senior field agent in the Office of Special Investigations. Her specialty wasn't mechanical failures, it was human ones. For 6 months, her office had been tracking an alarming spike in Code 14 passenger complaints, reports of bias, harassment, or improper removal, all originating from Global Airways, and one name appeared on those complaints with disturbing regularity: Brenda Sullivan. Brenda was a senior flight attendant with 22 years of service. On paper, she was a model employee, perfect attendance, glowing reviews from her superiors, and an expert knowledge of safety protocols. But a dark pattern was emerging from passenger feedback. Travelers of color, particularly black women, reported being singled out, aggressively pulsed for carry-on luggage, denied service, and spoken to with a venomous contempt that was always carefully masked as enforcing the rules. The complaints were always her word against theirs, and the airline's internal reviews consistently sided with their senior attendant. So Imani was sent to provide the one thing they couldn't argue with: a federal witness. She watched the gate area for Flight 1109. The aircraft, an Airbus A321, was being prepared, and there, at the podium, was Brenda Sullivan. Imani could spot her type from a mile away. Brenda had a posture of rigid authority. Her uniform was immaculate, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, shellacked bun that looked like it could deflect bullets. She was currently arguing with a young family, her voice a low, sharp razor. "Ma'am, as I have said, the stroller is too large for a gate check. It must be checked at the counter. You'll have to go back through security." "But they told us at the counter," the father began. "They were wrong. You're holding up my boarding process," Brenda snapped. Imani made her first mental note. 10:40 a.m., Gate 32. Subject Sullivan. Demonstrates zero de-escalation skills. Uses authority to deflect, not assist. When boarding for economy class was called, Imani joined the line. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, Brenda was at the aircraft door, greeting passengers. A white businessman in a crisp suit ahead of Imani smiled. "Morning, Brenda. Welcome aboard, Mr. Peterson. So good to see you again. Can I get your usual pre-departure started?" Brenda's voice was pure honey. Mr. Peterson, clearly a regular, beamed. "You're the best." Then it was Imani's turn. She stepped forward, making eye contact. "Good morning." Brenda's smile vanished. It didn't just fade, it was surgically removed. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan, from Imani's hoodie to her sneakers. She said nothing. She simply tore the boarding pass stub and thrust it back at her gaze already fixed on the passenger behind her. Imani proceeded down the narrow aisle, her backpack feeling suddenly heavier. She was used to being invisible, but this was different. This was deliberate erasure. She found her row. 24A, the window, was occupied by a young man listening to music. 24C, the aisle, was empty. She settled into 24B. The cabin was hot and stuffy as passengers jostled for overhead bin space. Imani slipped her backpack under the seat in front of her. It was a regulation bag containing her laptop, her secure phone, and her credentials. It was the only bag she had. She watched as the bins filled. A moment later, Brenda Sullivan marched down the aisle, her eyes scanning. "Folks, we have a full flight. Smaller bags must go under the seats. We need to move." A young mother in row 22, Sarah, was struggling to lift her diaper bag. "Ma'am, could I just—" "Under the seat," Brenda snapped, not even breaking stride. Then she spotted a small, wheeled carry-on in the bin above row 23. It belonged to the passenger in 24C, a white man in a polo shirt who had just settled in. Brenda smiled at him. "Sir, could you just nudge that back a bit?" "Perfect. Thank you." She then turned her attention to the bin above Imani's row. It was half empty. She grabbed a small jacket from the bin and held it up. "Whose is this?" A teenager a few rows back raised his hand. "This is for bags, not your coat," Brenda hissed, shoving it at him. She then slammed the overhead bin shut with a crack that made several people jump. She locked it. Imani watched, her blood pressure rising. The bin was not full. This wasn't about space. It was about control. Imani decided to test the waters. She unbuckled, stood up, and pointed to the bin. "Excuse me," she said politely. "My bag is under my seat, but there appears to be ample room in that bin. Could I place it up there for takeoff?" Brenda spun around. Her eyes, a cold, flat blue, locked onto Imani. "Absolutely not. That bin is full. I've already closed it. You should have boarded earlier if you wanted space. Put your bag under your seat and sit down. You're blocking the aisle." "It's not full," Imani stated, not as an argument, but as a fact. "I can see space from here." Brenda took a step closer, invading Imani's personal space. Her voice dropped to a low, menacing whisper. "Are you going to be a problem, Ma'am? I'm in charge of the safety of this aircraft, and I am telling you to sit down. Now." The entire section of the cabin went silent. The man in 24C stared determinedly at his magazine. The man in 24A didn't look up. Imani held Brenda's gaze for a long, charged second. This was the flashpoint. This was where a normal passenger would either shrink or explode. Imani did neither. "I understand," she said, her voice perfectly level. She calmly sat back down in 24B, buckled her seatbelt, and pulled out her personal, non-secure cell phone. She opened a blank notes app. 11:05 a.m. On board. Subject Sullivan. Falsely claimed full overhead bin. Refused regulation-compliant bag. Hoarding space. Hostile and targeted deboarding tone. Across the aisle, Brenda watched her typing. A slow, venomous smile crept onto her face. She saw Imani's phone, her hoodie, her seat in coach, and she saw a target. She saw someone she could make an example of. She walked to the forward galley and picked up the in-flight phone to call her junior colleague, Greg, in the aft. "Greg," she whispered, "keep an eye on 24B. The woman in the grey hoodie. She's already giving me attitude. I think she's one of those." "Those?" Greg's voice was hesitant. The complainers, the ones who film everything, looking for a payout. Don't serve her anything extra. Stick to the script. I've got a bad feeling about her. Brenda hung up and looked at her reflection in the small galley mirror. She wasn't just a flight attendant. She was the gatekeeper of her sky, and no one, especially not someone in 24B, was going to question her authority. The Airbus A321 climbed powerfully out of the New York area airspace, banking over the Atlantic before turning west. Below, the city shrank to a glittering map. Inside the cabin, the tension was a low-frequency hum, audible only to those tuned into it. For Dr. Imani Cole, it was a siren. She was documenting every interaction, every slight, every glance. This was the part of the job she hated, sitting in the crossfire, becoming the target to prove the target existed. But it was necessary. The FAA's authority wasn't just about engines and wings. It was about the legal and civil integrity of the flight experience. An hour into the flight, the drink service began. Brenda and Greg, the younger attendant, started from their respective galleys, meeting in the middle. Brenda, naturally, worked the first-class cabin first, a task she performed with the theatrical grace of a Broadway star. "Mr. Peterson?" her voice chimed. "Another bourbon? Of course. And some warm nuts? My pleasure." When she finally emerged, pushing the cart into the economy cabin, her entire demeanor shifted. The smile became a painted-on mask, her movements sharp and impatient. "Drink?" she snapped at the first row, not waiting for an answer. "Coke, Diet Coke, Sprite, water, coffee." "No." The cart rumbled toward Imani's row. Brenda served the man on the aisle, 24C. "I'll take a ginger ale," he said. "Sure thing," Brenda said, giving him a quick smile. She pulled out a cup, filled it with ice, and poured the ginger ale. Then she handed him the entire, unopened can. "There you go." He nodded. "Thanks." Then she turned to Imani. Her eyes were flat. "And you?" "I'll have a Coke, please," Imani said. Brenda grabbed a cup, filled it to the brim with ice, and poured a small splash of soda into it. The cup was maybe 1/3 full of actual liquid. Imani, who had been expecting this, held up a hand. "Could I please have the full can, like the gentleman next to me?" It was a simple, reasonable request, but to Brenda, it was a challenge to her authority. Brenda stopped. She put the cup down on the cart. "We are not permitted to give out full cans. It's against policy. We might run out on a long flight." Imani's voice was quiet, but it cut through the cabin noise. "You just gave the man in 24C a full can of ginger ale. I saw you." Brenda's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She leaned in close, using the cart as a barrier. "He is a Global Airways Platinum Medallion member. He gets special privileges." It was a plausible lie, but Imani knew the airline's service manual by heart. She also happened to be a concealed executive platinum member on this airline's main competitor, and she knew the perks. A full can of soda was a courtesy, not an ironclad rule reserved for the elite. It was a choice, and Brenda had made hers. "I see," Imani said, her voice betraying no emotion. "Then the cup is fine, thank you." She took the half-full cup of ice. Brenda, radiating smug victory, turned to the man in 24A and barked, "Drink?" Imani took a sip and opened her notes app again. 12:17 p.m. Drink service. Subject Sullivan. Enforced discriminatory service. Provided full can to passenger 24C, white, male. Refused same to 24B, black, female. Justified refusal with false claim of platinum status. Hostility continues. She glanced up. Brenda was at the end of the aisle, conferring with Greg. She pointed back toward Imani's row with her chin, her face a mask of scorn. Greg, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. He was young, and this was clearly not the job he had signed up for. He nodded, avoiding Brenda's eyes, and quickly started collecting trash. Imani knew what was happening. Brenda was building a narrative. In her mind, Imani was now the difficult passenger, the complainer. Brenda was laying the groundwork, poisoning the crew against her. This was how it always started. First, the isolation, then the escalation. A few rows ahead, the young mother, Sarah, who had been reprimanded at the gate, was having trouble. Her baby was crying, a piercing, unhappy wail that grated on everyone's nerves. Sarah was sweating, bouncing the child, her face a mask of frantic apology. I'm so sorry, she kept whispering. Brenda, on her way back to the galley, stopped. Mom, you need to control your child. Other passengers are trying to rest. I'm trying, Sarah said, tears welling in her eyes. I think his ears are hurting, or he's hungry. Well, you need to handle it, Brenda said, and brushed past her. Imani unbuckled her seatbelt. She leaned into the aisle. Excuse me, she said to Sarah, her voice warm for the first time. I have 2 kids. Sometimes it helps to have them suck on something during the altitude change. Do you have a bottle or a pacifier? Sarah looked up, grateful. He keeps spitting it out. Okay, Imani said. She reached for the flight attendant call button. A moment later, Greg appeared. He looked nervously from the call light to Imani. Hi, Imani said gently. This passenger's baby is in a lot of pain. Could you please bring a cup with a little bit of warm water and a napkin? Not hot, just warm. Greg looked confused. Warm water? Yes. Sometimes a little warm water can help clear their ears. Or, she said to Sarah, you can dip the pacifier in it. It's an old trick. Greg, seeing a solution, nodded. Oh, okay, right away. He hurried off. Brenda, who had been watching from the galley, emerged. What's the problem now? She demanded. There's no problem, Imani said calmly, sinking back into her seat. Your colleague is just helping a passenger. Brenda's eyes narrowed into slits. Imani had bypassed her. She had not only defied her, she had helped someone. In Brenda's warped view, this was an unforgivable offense. Imani wasn't just a complainer, she was undermining her. Greg returned with the warm water. Sarah, the young mother, gave Imani a look of profound gratitude. Imani simply nodded, then turned her gaze to the window, or at least the shoulder of the man sitting next to it. She could feel Brenda's stare burning into the side of her head. The battle lines were drawn, and Brenda Sullivan was preparing for war. The flight droned on. The cabin lights were dimmed, and most passengers were either asleep or absorbed in the blue glow of their seatback screens. For Imani, this was the most dangerous part of the flight, the quiet lull where tempers, like hairline fractures, could suddenly splinter. She had spent the last 90 minutes working on her secure FAA-issued laptop, shielded from view by her hoodie. She was compiling her report in real time, uploading the time-stamped notes to a secure server via the weak in-flight Wi-Fi. The file name was innocuous. GA 1109 Final Audit. The contents were damning. She closed the laptop, secured it in her backpack at her feet, and realized she needed to use the lavatory. She waited patiently for a few minutes. The occupied sign on the forward lavatory, the one just outside the first-class curtain, was on. The aft lavatories were a long way back. Finally, the light on the forward lavatory turned green. Imani unbuckled and stepped into the aisle. She took 2 steps forward. A figure emerged from the galley, blocking her path like a toll booth. It was Brenda. "Can I help you?" Brenda's voice was saccharine, but her stance was aggressive. "I'm just going to use the lavatory," Imani said, gesturing to the illuminated green, vacant sign. Brenda did not move. She crossed her arms. "I'm sorry, but this lavatory is reserved for first class and platinum members only. The economy lavatories are in the rear of the aircraft." This was a blatant, demonstrable lie. While airlines preferred passengers to use the lavatories in their ticketed cabin, it was not a hard and fast rule, and it was never a safety issue unless the seatbelt sign was on. It was off. Imani, ever the professional, did not argue. "Fine." She turned and began the long walk to the back of the plane. As she passed the aft galley, she saw Greg, who was nervously organizing soda cans. She used the lavatory, washed her hands, and headed back to her seat. As she walked, she had to squeeze past the drink cart, which Brenda had left parked in the middle of the aisle, while she chatted with a passenger she knew in row 12. Imani had to press herself against a seat to get by. She noted it, a clear violation of service procedures. She got back to 24B and sat down. She was frustrated, but she was still in observer mode. She pulled out her personal phone again to make a note. 1:45 p.m. Lavatory access. Subject Sullivan. Physically blocked access to vacant forward lavatory. Enforced a false first-class only rule. Left service cart unattended, blocking aisle. She was typing this note when she felt a shadow fall over her. Brenda was standing in the aisle, glaring down at her. "What are you doing?" Brenda demanded. Imani looked up slowly. "I'm writing a note on my phone." "You're filming me," Brenda hissed. Her voice was loud enough to make the passengers in the surrounding rows look up. "You've been filming me and the crew since we took off. That is a direct violation of federal law. You are interfering with a flight crew." This was the magic phrase. Interference with a flight crew was a serious federal offense, the one thing that gave flight attendants near absolute power. And Brenda had just invoked it. Imani kept her voice impossibly calm. "I am not filming you, Brenda. I am typing in my notes app." "Let me see the phone." "No," Imani said, not rudely but firmly. "You do not have the right to see my personal phone." This was the final straw for Brenda. Imani had refused an order. In her mind, this was open rebellion. "That's it," Brenda snarled. "You are a non-compliant passenger. You are a security risk." She grabbed the in-flight phone from the wall and dialed the cockpit. Her voice was now a mask of manufactured panic. "Captain Henderson, this is Brenda in the main cabin. I have a situation. It's the passenger in 24B. She paused, listening. "Yes, the one I mentioned earlier. She is non-compliant. She's refusing to follow crew instructions. She has been recording me and the crew for hours, and I suspect she is a security threat. I don't feel safe with her on this aircraft. I am requesting that you radio ahead. We need law enforcement to meet this flight at the gate." A ripple of genuine fear passed through the cabin. "Security threat?" a woman whispered. The man in 24C, who had been so engrossed in his magazine, now leaned away from Imani as if she were contagious. Imani Cole sat perfectly still. She slowly put her phone in her pocket. She looked at Brenda, who was staring at her with a look of pure, triumphant hatred. Brenda thought she was putting a difficult passenger in her place. She thought she was winning. Imani knew the truth. Brenda hadn't just made a mistake. She had just triggered a federal investigation into herself. She had taken the bait, swallowed the hook, and was now pulling the entire fishing boat down with her. The captain's voice came over the intercom, crackling with new authority. "Folks, this is Captain Henderson. Due to a security situation that has developed on board, we will be met by authorities upon our arrival in Los Angeles. For the safety of the crew and all passengers, I must insist that everyone remain in their seats until the all-clear is given." Now, the cabin was silent. Every eye was on Imani, They saw a black woman in a hoodie, now labeled a federal threat. Imani just closed her eyes. She sent a single, coded text from her secure phone, which was deep in her backpack. The text went to a number at the FAA Western Pacific Regional Office. It read, Alpha 1109. Code red. Gateside confirm. Await my signal. The response was immediate. Confirmed, Dr. Cole. LAX Federal Security is standing by. We have the ball. Imani put the phone away. She stared ahead. The game was on. The landing at LAX was smooth, but the atmosphere in the cabin was toxic. No one spoke. The usual cheerful chatter and jostling for bags was replaced by a heavy, suspicious silence. Every passenger who made eye contact with Imani did so with a mixture of fear and judgment. They had already tried and convicted her in their minds. Imani ignored them all. She sat with a preternatural calm, her hands folded in her lap. Brenda Sullivan, meanwhile, was performing for the cabin. She marched down the aisle, her face set in a mask of grave put-upon duty. She was the hero who had saved them all from an unknown threat. She stood near the front, conferring in low, serious tones with Greg, who looked pale and nauseous. Just follow my lead, Brenda instructed him. Tell them exactly what I told you. She was erratic, hostile, and recording us. It's a classic security probe. I've been trained for this. The plane docked at the gate with a gentle bump. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off, but the captain's voice boomed on again. All passengers must remain seated. Do not stand up. Do not retrieve your luggage. All passengers must remain seated. A moment later, the cabin door was opened. But instead of the usual stream of disembarking passengers, 3 figures stepped onto the plane. 2 were LAX airport police officers, their hands resting on their belts. The third was a man in a Global Airways suit, Todd Bishop, the airline's LAX station manager, his face grim. Officer Dunn, the senior of the 2, stepped forward. Captain? Ma'am. Brenda glided toward them. Officers, thank you for coming. I'm Brenda Sullivan, the lead flight attendant. The threat is in 24B. She pointed, a long, dramatic, accusatory finger. That woman, the one in the grey hoodie. Every head in the plane swiveled to watch. Officer Dunn and his partner, Officer Diaz, began the long, tense walk down the aisle. Passengers shrank back, pulling their feet in. Imani watched them approach, her face unreadable. Ma'am, Officer Dunn said, his voice hard. I'm going to need you to stand up and come with me. Please bring all your personal belongings. Imani nodded slowly. Of course, officer. She stood, reaching under the seat to retrieve her Jan Sport backpack. She swung it over one shoulder. Let's go, the officer said. As Imani stepped into the aisle, a man in a nearby seat muttered, Unbelievable. Put us all at risk. Imani began the walk. It was a walk of shame, a gauntlet of 23 rows of hostile stares. As she passed the first-class cabin, Brenda was standing in the galley, arms crossed, a small victorious smirk playing on her lips. She had won. She had protected her plane. Imani met her gaze. She said nothing. She just held that look, her eyes conveying a cold, deep intelligence that Brenda, in her arrogance, mistook for defiance. The officers escorted her off the plane and onto the jet bridge. The air was cool and smelled of jet fuel. It was a sterile, liminal space, and it was about to become an execution chamber. Right here, Officer Dunn said, stopping her halfway to the terminal. Stand against the wall. Imani did as she was told. Captain Robert Henderson had emerged from the cockpit, his face creased with worry. Todd Bishop, the station manager, was wiping his sweaty palms on his suit trousers, and Brenda Sullivan stood at the entrance to the jet bridge, observing her victory, joined by Greg, who looked like he was about to faint. Okay, ma'am, Officer Dunn said. pulling out a notepad. "Ms. Sullivan, the lead flight attendant, has reported that you were non-compliant with crew instructions, were filming crew members in a manner consistent with a security probe, and created a hostile environment." "She threatened me," Brenda added from the doorway, her voice sharp. "She refused to show me what she was filming. I acted in the interest of safety." Imani looked at Officer Dunn. "Officer, what is the specific accusation? Am I being detained?" "You are being detained for investigation, yes," Dunn said. "Now I need to see your identification." "Very well," Imani said. She unzipped the small front pocket of her backpack. Brenda scoffed. "Probably doesn't even have a real ID." Imani's hand emerged. She was holding a simple, standard California driver's license. She handed it to Officer Dunn. "Imani Cole," he read. He looked at it, then at her. "Okay. Is this it?" Brenda rolled her eyes. "See? I knew it. Just some random person looking for a fight." Imani looked at Brenda. Her voice was suddenly devoid of all warmth, all pretense. It was as cold and sharp as a scalpel. "Ms. Sullivan," Imani said, "you were correct about one thing. I was watching you." She reached back into her bag. "But I wasn't filming." She pulled out a dark blue, leather-bound credential case. She flipped it open. "I was conducting a federal audit." The silence that fell on the jet bridge was absolute. The only sound was the distant whine of a turbine from the tarmac below. Officer Dunn, who had been holding Imani's driver's license, froze. He looked at the new ID she was holding out. It wasn't a police badge. It was something far more potent in this environment. The ID was laminated, holographic, and bore the official seal of the United States Department of Transportation. He took it from her hand, as if it were radioactive. He read the credentials, his eyes widening with each word. United States of America, Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, Dr. Imani Cole, Aviation, Safety Inspector, OIS 5, Office of Special Investigations. Officer Dunn's entire posture changed. The hard cop evaporated, replaced by a stunned, procedural professional. He looked up at Imani, his face pale. "Dr. Cole, is this active?" "It is, officer," Imani said. Her voice was no longer that of a passenger in 24B. It was the voice of pure, unadulterated authority. She turned her gaze to the airline employees. "Captain Henderson, Mr. Bishop." Captain Henderson stepped forward, snatching the credentials from the officer's hand. He read them, and the color drained from his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What?" Brenda demanded, stepping forward. "What is that? It's a fake. It's got to be a fake." Imani looked at her. "Ms. Sullivan, my credentials and my mission brief were just confirmed by the LAX Federal Security Director and your own airline's corporate security head, who are both currently patched into Officer Dunn's radio. This jet bridge is now a secure federal inspection site, and you are the subject of the investigation." Brenda's smirk disintegrated. Her face, which had been flushed with victory, went a ghostly, mottled white. No." Imani took her credentials back from the stunned captain. "My name is Dr. Imani Cole. I am the lead investigator on FAA Operation Safe Skies, a 6-month undercover audit into a pattern of systemic Code 14 bias complaints filed against Global Airways. Specifically," and here she locked her eyes on Brenda, "the 34 complaints filed against you, Ms. Sullivan, in the last 24 months. Todd Bishop, the station manager, let out a small, strangled sound. 34? Oh no. Oh no. Brenda was shaking her head, stammering. Complaints? Those were difficult passengers. They were non-compliant. I was doing my job. Were you doing your job, Miss Sullivan? Imani countered, her voice like ice. When you denied me overhead bin space, claiming a bin was full when it was visibly empty? Were you doing your job when you violated your own service manual by refusing me a full can of soda, citing a platinum policy that you invented moments after giving one to the white passenger next to me? Were you doing your job when you physically blocked me from a vacant lavatory, enforcing another non-existent first-class rule? With every question, Brenda flinched as if she'd been struck. Imani took a step closer. And were you doing your job, or were you committing a federal crime when you filed a false report to the captain claiming I was a security risk for typing on my phone? You escalated a situation to a level 2 security threat, forcing this aircraft to be met by law enforcement, all because your ego was bruised. I thought you were filming, Brenda cried, her voice cracking. It's policy. No one is allowed to film us. Even if I had been, which I wasn't, Imani snapped. A passenger recording poor customer service is not a security threat. It is a customer service issue. But you, Ms. Sullivan, saw my hoodie. You saw my skin color, and you saw your chance to assert your power. You didn't see a passenger, you saw a target, and you missed. You didn't just harass a passenger, Brenda. You harassed a federal inspector during the commission of her duties. You have interfered with a federal investigation, and you have single-handedly provided me with all the evidence I need to ground you, permanently. Captain Henderson finally found his voice, and it was shaking with rage. Not at Imani, but at his lead attendant. Brenda, what have you done? Greg, the junior attendant, who had been silent this entire time, finally spoke. She told me to, he whispered. She told me to watch her. She said she was a complainer. She told me to lie about the service. Brenda spun on him. You snake! Enough! Officer Dunn shouted, finally moving. He stepped between Brenda and Greg. Imani looked at the station manager, Todd Bishop, who was sweating through his suit. Mr. Bishop, Imani commanded, I want Ms. Sullivan's and Mr. Gregg's employee credentials now. They are both suspended, effective immediately, pending my investigation. Captain, you are to remain here. I need your full statement. Officer, please escort Mr. Gregg to a separate area. I will take his statement in a moment. As for Miss Sullivan, Imani turned to the white-faced, trembling woman. You are to remain here. You will be escorted by airport security to a debriefing room, where you will surrender your statement and your wings. You are not to contact any other crew members. You are not to set foot on another Global Airways aircraft. Is that understood? Brenda Sullivan looked at the black woman in the hoodie who she had tried to destroy. She saw the power she had worshipped her entire life, and it was now aimed directly at her. She didn't or couldn't answer. She just made a small, choking sound and slid down the wall of the jet bridge, collapsing onto the industrial-grade carpet, a broken, finished woman. The sterile tube of the jet bridge had transformed into the epicenter of a corporate and federal crisis. Todd Bishop, the station manager, was on his phone, his back to the scene, speaking in low, panicked tones to a legal team in Chicago. Yes, an FAA inspector, undercover. Yes, it was Brenda Sullivan. I understand. Yes, full cooperation. Captain Henderson was leaning against the wall, his hat in his hand, his face a mask of profound regret and dawning fury. I just took her word for it, he said, mostly to himself. 22 years she's been flying. I trusted her. And that, Captain, is part of the failure, Imani said, pulling her laptop from her backpack. Your trust enabled a known problem. Your failure to question or verify a report from a crew member with a documented history of bias complaints will be a significant part of my report to your superiors and to the FAA's Enforcement Division." The captain winced. "I'm grounded, aren't I?" "That's not my call," Imani said. "But you can expect to be in a simulator and a de-escalation training class for a very long time. You endangered this aircraft by accepting a false report without question." Officer Dunn returned, having deposited Greg in a nearby gate area. "Dr. Cole, he's secure. What do you need for Ms. Sullivan?" Imani looked down at the sobbing flight attendant. The venom, the arrogance, the smug superiority. It had all boiled away, leaving behind a pathetic, terrified husk. "Officer, please have Officer Diaz escort Ms. Sullivan to the airport's interagency debriefing room. She is not to be left alone. She is a flight risk, though not in the way she imagines," Imani said dryly. "Mr. Bishop," she called out, "you need to be present. This is now an internal airline matter, prompted by a federal investigation. You will take her formal statement, and you will retrieve all of her airline and airport-issued credentials. She is to be suspended without pay, effective immediately. Immediately." "Yes, of course, Dr. Cole," Bishop stammered, rushing over. "Brenda, get up," Officer Dunn said, his voice now devoid of any sympathy. He pulled her to her feet. "My career," Brenda wept. "My whole life. You can't do this. I was just following the rules." "You were not following the rules," Imani's voice cracked like a whip. "You were following your prejudice. You saw me, and you made an assumption, and you built a narrative of lies to support that assumption. You called the police on a black woman for trying to use the bathroom, and it just so happened that this time, the black woman you targeted had the power to end your career. Now think about all the other times, Brenda. The 34 complaints, the women who weren't federal inspectors, the women who went home humiliated, the women who were kicked off flights, who missed funerals, who missed business meetings. You did this to them. What's happening to you now? This isn't an injustice. This is a reckoning." Brenda had no answer. She allowed herself to be led away. A procession of a single, disgraced employee, her career ending not with a retirement party, but with a police escort down a service corridor. With Brenda gone, Imani turned her attention to Greg, the junior attendant. She, Officer Dunn, and Todd Bishop went to the empty gate where he was waiting, looking like a teenager outside the principal's office. "Mr. Gregg?" Imani said, her voice softening significantly. "Sit down." He did, trembling. I'm going to be fired, aren't I? I'll tell you everything. She's awful. She's awful to everyone who isn't in first class or, who doesn't look like her. She told me to watch you. She told me to deny you service. She said you were one of those and that the company would back her up. I'm new. I was scared. Imani studied him. You should have been scared, Mr. Gregg. But of the right thing. You should have been scared of violating federal DOT regulations. You should have been scared of discriminating against a passenger. But you were scared of Brenda. That's a training failure, and a personal one. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You have a choice," Imani said. "You can be charged as an accomplice to Ms. Sullivan's false report, or you can become a material witness for the FAA. You will provide a full, sworn affidavit detailing everything you saw today, and everything you have seen Ms. Sullivan do on previous flights. Your testimony will be used in the FAA's case against her, and in our civil penalty case against Global Airways." "Yes," Greg said, nodding vigorously. "Anything. I'll do it. She's a bully. She's been doing this for years." "Mr. Bishop," Imani said, Mr. Gregg is grounded. He's not to fly, but he is to remain on the payroll, pending his full cooperation with my investigation." "Of course, Dr. Cole. Whatever you need," Bishop said. Imani finally closed her laptop. The initial field report was filed. The wheels of justice were now turning. The passengers from Flight 1109 had long since deplaned, being told only that a security misunderstanding had been resolved. They would never know the full story, but in a few days, they wouldn't have to. The press would. Imani Cole shouldered her JanSport backpack. It felt lighter. "Mr. Bishop," she said, "I'm done here. I'll be at the LAX Hilton. My team from the regional office will be here at 800 tomorrow to begin the full airline audit. I expect all of Ms. Sullivan's flight logs, all 34 complaints, and all internal reviews to be on the table. Am I clear?" "Crystal, Dr. Cole," he said. "Good." She turned and walked away, past the gate and into the terminal. She blended back into the river of travelers, once again invisible. But this time she was invisible with the grim satisfaction of a job well and truly done. The fallout from Flight 1109 was not quiet, and it was not small. It was a corporate explosion, a legal detonation that sent shrapnel ripping through every level of global airways. It began the next morning at 800 sharp in a sterile conference room at the LAX Hilton. Dr. Imani Cole, now dressed in a sharp, dark grey pantsuit, sat at the head of the table. Flanking her were two humorless lawyers from the FAA's Western Pacific Regional Office and a senior compliance director. Across from them sat Todd Bishop, who looked like he hadn't slept, and three ashen-faced executives who had taken the red-eye from Chicago. On the table between them was Imani's report. It was not a report in the traditional sense. It was a 200-page, meticulously cross-referenced indictment. It contained her time-stamped notes, Gregg's tearful and detailed affidavit, Captain Henderson's statement of regretful negligence, and an appendix that listed all 34 prior complaints filed against Brenda Sullivan. Each complaint was a ghost, a story of a passenger, mostly women of color, who had been humiliated, denied service, or threatened, only to have their claims dismissed by the airline's internal reviews as unsubstantiated. "Dr. Cole's field audit," one of the FAA lawyers said, his voice flat, "has provided what your internal processes were designed to ignore. Substantiation. Her experience was not an anomaly, it was the pattern." Brenda Sullivan's suspension lasted exactly 24 hours. The call came from a Global Airways VP, not even Todd Bishop. It was cold, corporate, and final. "Brenda," the voice on the phone said, "we have reviewed the preliminary report from the Federal Aviation Administration. We are terminating your employment for cause, effective immediately, for the filing of a false security report, gross misconduct, and repeated violations of DOT anti-discrimination statutes." "You can't!" Brenda shrieked, her voice a mix of panic and her old familiar arrogance. "I have 22 years. I was protecting my crew. I'll sue. The union." "The union has already been briefed," the VP cut in, his voice like ice. "They've seen the report. They will not be representing you. You are a liability we can no longer afford. A package with your final effects will be mailed to you. Do not attempt to use your credentials to access any global airways or airport property." The click of the line disconnecting was the sound of her world ending. But losing her job was only the first circle of her personal hell. Losing her career was the next. The FAA's Enforcement Division reviewed Imani's case. They formally revoked Brenda's airman medical certificate and her flight attendant certification. She was permanently grey-listed. She could never work as a crew member on any U.S. air carrier or any international carrier that complied with FAA standards ever again. Her 22-year identity was erased. Then, the public humiliation began. A passenger from Flight 1109, a college student who had been sitting in row 25, had been filming. Not the initial confrontation, he'd been too intimidated, but the aftermath. His shaky phone footage captured it all. The shot of Imani, calm and collected, being led off the plane by two cops, followed by the smug, victorious smirk on Brenda's face as she watched from the galley. He had kept recording. The video then showed the same officers, minutes later, dragging a weeping, collapsed Brenda out of the jet bridge, her perfect bun now askew, her face a mask of catastrophic ruin. He posted it with the title, "Flight Attendant's Karen. Moment ends her career after she has the wrong passenger arrested." It hit TikTok, then Twitter, then Reddit. By the end of the week, it had 50 million views. The media feeding frenzy was instantaneous. The New York Times, the Washington Post, every cable news channel. The story of the racist flight attendant who accidentally called security on the high-level FAA inspector sent to investigate her was irresistible. Brenda Sullivan became a household name, a verb, a meme for prejudice meeting spectacular, high-altitude karma. News anchors dissected her 34 prior complaints, asking the question that now plagued the airline. How was she allowed to fly? Brenda's life disintegrated. She lost her apartment, unable to make rent. She was unemployable. Her face was too recognizable. She was spotted 6 months later at a hotel job fair, applying for a customer service manager position. She was in a cheap blazer, her face gaunt. Another applicant in the waiting area, a young woman, recognized her. "Oh my God," the woman said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "I know you. You're the flight attendant, the one from the news." The room went silent. The recruiter looked up, his smile freezing. Brenda's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She grabbed her purse and fled the room, the sound of her own footsteps echoing in her ears. She was last seen by a former co-worker working a graveyard shift at a 24-hour convenience store, wiping down a coffee machine, a bitter, haunted woman who had lost everything because she couldn't abide a black woman in a hoodie. The karma for Global Airways was equally severe. The Department of Transportation, citing Dr. Cole's damning and courageous report, hit the airline with one of the largest fines in its history for civil rights violations. $2.5 million. They were also forced into a binding consent decree overseen by the FAA to completely overhaul their in-flight service and de-escalation training. The new, mandatory 6-week course was designed with direct input from Dr. Imani Cole's team. It was unofficially nicknamed the 24B Protocol. Trainers now used footage of the incident, blurred for the public but not for the trainees, as a case study in what not to do. A passenger's phone, the trainers would drill, is not a security threat. Your ego is. Captain Robert Henderson was grounded for 6 months. He spent 3 of those in intensive retraining, which included a mandated session with Dr. Cole herself. He had to sit, face to face, and explain why he had defaulted to trusting a biased report. He returned to the cockpit a more humble and far more careful man. He never again took a crew member's word for it without verification. Greg, the junior flight attendant, became a star witness. His honest, detailed affidavit was crucial. He was retrained, and after a period of paid leave, he chose to return to flying. On his first flight back, a passenger quietly recognized him, and, as she was deplaning, pressed a note into his hand. It said, "Thank you for telling the truth." He became an advocate for the new training program and a quiet leader among the junior crew, encouraging them to speak up against seniority abuse. And Dr. Imani Cole? She was back at a federal training center in Virginia, briefing a new class of undercover inspectors. She stood before them in a crisp blue suit, the JanSport backpack sitting on the table beside her. "Your job is not to be a hero," she told the new recruits, her voice filling the lecture hall. "Your job is to be a mirror. You are there to reflect the truth of the system, whether that system is made of metal and wiring or flesh and blood. Some days that means checking engine manifolds. Other days," a ghost of a smile touched her lips, "it means sitting in a middle seat and ordering a Coke. Remember, the safety of an aircraft is not just about the hardware. It's about the software, the people. And prejudice is the most dangerous virus you will ever find at 30,000 feet. Your job is to find it and to remove it. Go to work." The sky is supposed to be for everyone, but for years, one woman tried to make it her own private kingdom, ruling with prejudice and ego. What she didn't know was that the very person she tried to humiliate was the one person with the power to bring her entire world crashing down. This isn't just a story about karma. It's a real-life lesson that your actions, especially those hidden behind a uniform, have consequences. The quietest passenger might just be the one holding the most power. If you were moved by this story of justice and accountability, please hit that like button. It tells us you want more content like this. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to see that karma is real. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell.